If you find yourself apologizing to your cat for being late because your cat apparently keeps time with moral judgment, this list was written for you. We're counting down 50 delightfully unnerving signs that you love your pets more than people. The little behaviors that start cute and eventually read like the plot of a cozy thriller where everyone is a furball. Think of this as a friendly mirror with a paw print smudge. The reflections are accurate, slightly damp, and oddly comforting. 1. You arrange your living room for optimal fur distribution, not for human conversation. The couch cushions have a permanent indent where your dog sleeps. The spare chair is merely a decorative concession to guests you seldom sit in. You know you're bad when the floor plan's teaser line in your online listing would read, "Main attraction, chaise longue for 1.5 Labradors." 2. Your phone's wallpaper is your pet, and it's in a pose that suggests they secretly own the company. Not a family photo, not your partner. A portrait of a cat mid-yawn that you swore was regal the 3rd time you edited it. You have a whole folder labeled good angles that would shame Vogue. 3. You pick vacation spots based on dog parks and cat cafes. Sure, the museum looks great online, but does the hotel offer turn-down service for squeaky toys? Bonus sign, your packing list puts Pibble in a collapsible water bowl above sunscreen. You've become fluent in pet-friendly as though it's its own language. 4. You use pet attributes as party small talk. Instead of, "What do?" you ask, "How does Fluffy feel about strangers?" You measure people by whether their hands smell like treats and whether they kneel correctly at eye level. If a date refuses to scratch behind the ear, the conversation is over. 5. You have gifts queued up indefinitely, waiting for no reason. Every holiday becomes a convenient alibi for acquiring an extra plush mouse, a gourmet bone, or a sweater so tiny and absurd that your friends assume you work at an artisan doll workshop. You call it treat budgeting. 6. You text pictures of your pet to people who asked for nothing. The grammar is poor, the captions are ecstatic. "He blinked at 2:34 p.m. This is peak content." Their response is a thumbs up emoji. You interpret that as a lifetime subscription. 7. Your calendar is color-coded around feeding times. Meetings get rescheduled if they clash with a nap cycle. You're not late, you're prioritizing circadian alignment with a creature who naps like a monk. Your employer mentions flexibility in the staff handbook for personal obligations, and you feel seen. 8. You buy matching accessories. Matching bandanas, matching scarves, matching sweaters. You make a joke about coordinating for holiday cards and then spend an hour arranging poses like a low-budget photo shoot. The neighbors assume you belong to a quaint cult. 9. Your bed is zoned. There is the human zone, the pet zone, and the negotiation strip where the treaties are signed each night. You have learned early that surrender is cheaper than repositioning a 60-pound dog. You now sleep in the negotiation strip and dream of treaties. 10. You keep a lost and found drawer strictly for pet-related items. Collars, a lone feather toy, a single squeaker. To anyone else, it's chaos. To you, it's a carefully curated archive of services rendered. You can identify each squeak by memory and trauma level. 11. You invent nicknames that only the pet understands. They answer to 3 different names, depending on the room and the time of day. Some of those names are affectionately deranged. At family gatherings, you refer to them as His Majesty, and relatives accept it because they have learned not to correct success. 12. You volunteer as cat sitter for friends' vacations and somehow gain custody of multiple plants and responsibilities. The phone rings at 3 a.m. because a neighbor saw a suspicious bag of kibble. You arrive with a flashlight and a suitcase labeled SOS Fur. You do this not out of obligation, but because the social bond of mutual pet care is the most trustworthy network you know. 13. You speak in the third person on your pet's behalf and don't apologize. She disagrees with that decision. He would like more croutons. You defend these pronouncements as empathy. Also, you are beginning to suspect your cat has a sharper political compass than your last roommate. 14. You rationalize pet-centric expenditures with alarming creativity. I didn't buy myself new shoes. I bought safety footwear for muddy paw retrieval. The accountant of your heart submits quarterly reports of cost per pet snuggle and calls it a moral imperative. 15. You get into heated arguments on online forums defending your pet's honor, then close tabs with the solemnest regret because your comment thread has somehow evolved into a long-form debate about tail etiquette. You cannot let an internet stranger misrepresent Fido. It's a civic duty of the furred. If you're already thinking of your furry dictator, hit subscribe and join the club. Strictly voluntary, but attendance is encouraged for moral support and shareable memes. 16. You start to excuse human flaking because your pet will always show up. They said they'd be there because they were on time-ish, which is more than a cat will do. You measure reliability by treat delivery and single out no-shows with a low-level moral inventory. It's a data-driven affection. 17. You cancel events because the pet needs emotional support. Credit card unlocks are denied in favor of watchful proximity. You say it as if your cat has an appointment at the soul clinic. Friends accept the term because it feels less judgmental than, I just want my couch back. 18. You have designated guest protocols.
Furniture is rearranged. Treats are provided with disclosure forms, and there is a mandatory kneeling demonstration before human-to-pet contact is authorized. You offer visitors a simple test. Do you own a treat or a dog-eared copy of a pet care book? Guests who pass are allowed entry. 19. You've trained your pet to decline small talk at parties. A swift nuzzle equals, that's fine. A long stare equals, please leave now. Your training videos would trend as satire, but are, in fact, terrifyingly effective. This is less performance art and more social curation. 20. You judge people by the cleanliness of their shoes and whether they notice a fur tumble at 2 a.m. You appreciate subtlety. A seeming indifference to pet hair is cultural literacy. If someone says, oh, I love animals, and then steps on a squeaker without remorse, it's a disqualifier. 21. You assign the pet a VIP seat when guests arrive. It's a psychological tactic. The pet sits in the throne, the guest sits in the apology chair. The guest then must earn approbation through snacks and slow blinking. This is both theater and diplomacy, and you staged it with intent. 22. You give up hobbies because they interfere with pet schedules. Quiet mornings at the pottery wheel, replaced by 7 a.m. walks and interpretive belly rubs. You maintain that ceramics was a phase anyway. The pet, however, maintains a consistent rating on affection scales. 23. Your social media story is a feed of obligations to a small mammal. Poll. Does Daisy prefer tuna or turkey tonight? Votes pour in. The comment section becomes an active legislative body for pet welfare, but also a gentle democracy of memes. You are elected mayor with a mandate for snuggles. 24. You have clandestine stash spots for emergency treats, a protocol for snack deployment, and a secret supply of novelty collars that you only bring out on bad days. The feeling is not hoarding, it's contingency planning. You would be a great general. You choose to be a devoted caretaker instead. 25. You write love notes that are essentially instructions for the pet and tuck them in your own pockets. Remember, extra sleep before vet visit. You find yourself reading these notes out loud like urgent dispatches and feeling a small swell of domestic pride. It isn't eccentricity when executed with precision. 26. You tell stories about your pet's past as if it were heroic epics. He survived the great sofa migration of 2018. Friends nod politely, then ask for more details. You deliver them with relish, and everyone learns the way life is better when narrated by a person who treats a cat as a veteran. 27. You maintain a guest list of approved humans by pet mood. Some friends are treat-bearing, some are toy-wielding, and a select few are approved knoppers. You categorize their interactions in your head like a sommelier pairing people to pets. You are terribly proud of the system. 28. You schedule coffee dates around nops. Your life now orbits a circadian rhythm of another species, and you've never felt more content. The world moves fast. The living room moves slower. You find comfort in synchronized breathing and the soft punctuation of a purring engine. 29. You have a strict no kids policy at 3 a.m. because someone once woke the dog and it took the household 3 days to recover. The decision is framed as concern for the pet, but also protects your sleep hygiene, which is key to civilization. You tell this story to new acquaintances who slowly learn to respect bedtime boundaries. 31. You teach your pet political loyalty. It's mostly ceremonial. One blanket for one team, a tiny bandana and seasonal colors. You cheer during games as if your animal has invested a lifetime in sportsmanship. The pet yawns majestically, then accepts treats for bipartisan reasons. 31. You let pets set the thermostat. It's all right if it's a little chilly, you tell fellow humans, but the thermostat reads 69 for the dog, 68 for guests. You have a spreadsheet in your mind tracking fur density to temperature ratios. You will defend your choices robustly. 32. You make small talk with delivery drivers about your pet's temperament. They, being kind and well-practiced, indulge you. You now have an informal network of civic pet observers who can confirm that your pet is indeed majestic. It feels like an old-world village. You are nostalgic for the time you never lived in. 33. You invent reasons to go to pet stores for a quick look and return with an elaborate prop bank. The receipt adds up. You do not regret it. In fact, you strategize your next just browsing expedition like a covert operative planning a heist of cuteness. 34. You have an entire playlist titled Walk Music, curated by mood, pace, and tail wag. There is a sprinting past squirrels mix and a slow, dignified stroll in the mist section. You use music for alignment, and the dog reacts to minor tempo changes like a conductor to an orchestra. It is glorious. 35. You secretly celebrate pet birthdays with more pomp than human birthdays. There are candles, a small cake that is definitely pet safe, party hats slightly askew, and an invite list dominated by stuffed animals. You text friends photos and they respond with hearts. You keep the receipts for posterity. As you're hearing these, maybe you're smug, maybe you're nodding in shame, and maybe you're idly making notes for a themed party. But before you convince yourself these are charming eccentricities, remember the escalation is deliberately calibrated. The early signs are the gentle tugs. The later ones will feel like a full embrace by someone else's lap.
Of course, in reality, you wouldn't list a pet as legal emergency contact. Consider this expressive hyperbole, and obviously, don't do that. 37. You draft vows to your pet in jest, then save them in a folder marked, possibly someday. It starts as a joke, for better, for furrier, and ends as a surprisingly tender set of promises about consistency and presence. You laugh, but your hand trembles as you close the document, because there is truth inconveniently nested in the humor. 38. You consult your pet before making social decisions. This begins with a glance. Will they wag? Will they stare? Will they move the bowl? You interpret those tiny motions as votes. It's less about control and more about a profound trust that their mood is an honest metric. You would consult a horoscope if your cat allowed it. 39. You schedule dinner dates based on whether your pet will approve of the cooking smell and whether the venue is conducive to post-date nops. Your flirtations must survive scent testing and compatibility with a living room couch. If the visitor is allergic, the situation dissolves politely. 40. You have contingency plans for the day you go away, including a detailed manifesto of where each treasured squeaker will be buried, who inherits the blanket with the distinguished hair, and whether the neighbor is allowed to follow the treat schedule or perish memorandum. It's not morbidity, it's insurance. Also, you will leave cookies and an instruction manual written in diagrams. 41. You engage in passive-aggressive love for humans by adopting pets that look exactly like ex-partners in spirit. He always used to sit like that. You see shapes and shadows in the whiskers and call it aesthetic continuity. It's not revenge, it's pattern recognition. 42. You create seating charts that are pet-centered for holidays. Uncle Bob sits where he can be tolerated by the cat. Aunt May sits where the dog will not shed on her scarf. And strangers are assigned to the safe distance zone. Your holiday emails of intent include a map and legend. It's thoughtful, if slightly militaristic. 43. You have a no-date policy that is unspoken but enforceable by the cat's sandbox of judgment. Dates either pass the sniff test or they do not. You frame this as curatorial, preserving the serene ecosystem of your domicile. People start to respect the sanctity of the litter box. 44. You practice elaborate signals to uninvite people politely. A specific whistle, a candle arrangement, the sudden appearance of a particularly lifeless plush. The signals are mostly theatrical, and they work more often than they should. Again, theater. Again, diplomacy. 45. You keep a photo album of firsts. First walk, first toy, first time the cat used a yoga pose convincingly. The captions are touching and include the minor humiliations you've suffered on behalf of this beast. Friends leaf through it and wonder if this is what devotion to a small creature looks like. It is. 46.
You begin to anthropomorphize obligations into pet rituals. Tonight we'll mourn collectively, you say to the dog during a TV scene, and then you both proceed to make the moment solemn. This practice turns ordinary nights into mini ceremonies, and suddenly there is more ritual in your life than there ever was. 47. You hold grudges on behalf of your pet. Someone steps on their tail and you catalog it in a ledger. There's a small secret tally. You are not encouraging revenge, you simply archive injustices from moral accounting. It is cumulative and oddly satisfying. 48. You arrange your will in a way that makes improbable promises to a creature that cannot legally inherit, but will be lavishly cared for by a chosen human friend. The document includes instructions about favorite sunbeams and a list of authorized toy rotations. The lawyer raises an eyebrow. You smile and insist it's the sentimental clause. 49. You decline invitations because the pet's social calendar is fuller. I already promised to supervise Whisker's nap becomes a perfectly legitimate excuse. You tell acquaintances that your time is apportioned by purrs and tail wags. They either accept it or they don't ask again. By now, the behaviors have formed a pattern. Small rituals, then systems, then narratives. You have built an entire ethics around a creature who offers unconditional love in rearranged piles of fur. It's charming, it's slightly obsessive, and it's a very human kind of devotion. Here, before we tip into the truly absurd, take a breath. Maybe look at your phone, check your wallpaper, or glance at the closest creature asleep in a heap of comfort. Notice how normal this feels. Notice, too, that normal is a flexible thing when the currency is mutual warmth. And if you've laughed, nodded, or felt the itch to defend your own best friend, drop a comment with the number that got closest to home. Which one are you? Which one will you deny and then quietly admit to later? Share your favorite emblem of pet first living, and subscribe if you like these confessions whispered in the key of fur. There are more where these came from. 50. You legally change your last name to something suspiciously feline or canine, and then spend a week deciding whether to update your driver's license or simply let the neighbors keep guessing. You go through the formality for the pleasure of seeing two words, your name and their name, side by side on official paper, both stamped in the same bureaucratic font. You order monogrammed collars because consistency matters. You test your new name at coffee shops like an art piece. Yes, it's Mr. Whiskerly now. Pleasure. In the privacy of your kitchen, you practice signing holiday cards, love, your new name, and pet's title. And when a bank clerk raises an eyebrow, you explain with the same deadpan logic you use to defend sweaters. Identity is fluid. Fur is forever.
Obviously, this is a theatrical flourish more than a life plan. Do your paperwork responsibly, check local rules, and maybe keep your social security number intact. But there is an undeniable small thrill in making the affection official. After that particular crest, the name change, the monogrammed collars, the celebratory ledger of toy rotations, you notice a curious thing. The rituals that felt like private jokes now function as social signage. People learn your boundaries without you having to enforce them with sharpness. Your neighbor rings the bell at 6 to hand off a bag of treats. Your friend brings a new squeaky toy as a peace offering after a disagreement about weekend plans. The barista knows to ask, is this for you or the dog? And you never have to explain that sometimes the more honest answer is both. What we've done in this list is map a constellation of tiny choices that, over time, redraw our social maps. There's the practical side. Pets require feedings, walks, vet visits, and the far more interesting cultural side. Rituals, language shifts, and new kinds of intimacy that don't always look like romantic or familial intimacy. A dog who insists on placing his head on your knee is performing a kind of quiet governance. A cat who knocks a cup off the counter at 3 a.m. is executing a policy of surprise. We adopt. We rewrite calendars around delicate stomachs and fragile joints, and we silently trade the clamor of parties for the small, reliable punctuation of a purr.
This isn't pathology, it's preferential economy. We put resources, time, money, attention where we feel best returned. Pets offer non-judgmental company. Pets do not call at inconvenient hours to rehash a fight. Pets exist entirely in the present tense, which is its own radical kind of mercy. Still, the charm of these behaviors depends on boundaries. A life that centers a pet can be rich and expansive, but it can also narrow if the rituals become the only rituals you keep. The difference between an anecdote and an ethos is whether you widen the circle or close it. So what does it look like to widen the circle without abandoning the sofa? For many of us, it means translation rather than sacrifice. Instead of telling friends, "No, I can't," we say, "Yes, I'll bring Daisy. She's excellent company and will judge your shoes politely." Instead of inventing 1,000-word justifications for a canceled dinner, we build social rituals that include our pets, walk and talk coffee dates, park meetups, porch hangouts, so that we maintain human contact without violating the dignity of a midday nap. The pets remain central and the humans remain in orbit. Both get fed, and ideally, both are delighted. Of course, not every sign on the list requires rehabilitation. Some are merely exquisite oddities of modern life. Playlists for walking and themed birthday cakes are not harms. They are creative declarations of love.
The worrying ones are the signs that morph into literal exclusion, where friends stop trying because they expect rejection, where professional opportunities slip past because the pet schedule cannot be rescheduled, where rituals become rigid liturgies that cannot admit a guest. That's where the small, practical choices matter. The friend you reschedule once, the sitter you finally hire for peace of mind, the simple experiment of bringing a human into the petty sovereignty of your living room and seeing what happens. There is also a moral humor in this lifestyle that we haven't fully accounted for. Pet-first living occasionally forces humans into their own humility. You invent intricate systems to serve a creature who will never remember the ethic behind them. You train yourself to follow tail signals and soft vocalizations that do not map easily onto human speech. You learn to apologize to inanimate objects because the pet preferred them at one point. This is a practice of attention, and attention is a form of generosity. It can be modest and heroic in equal measure. Some of you will read this and think each line applies to someone else. Others will be scrolling through your mental Rolodex of embarrassing anecdotes, laughing with a sharp intake of air when a sign lands too close to home. That is the point. We are not writing prescriptions. We are naming behaviors so you can recognize them, either to cherish or to change. Naming is not condemnation. It is recognition. You can see a pattern only after someone calls it out, and once you see it, you can choose differently. To be clear, none of this is meant to shame. The pet-first life is not a moral failing. It's often a brilliant solution to loneliness and a generous reallocation of affection. Many people form beautiful, sustaining bonds with animals that complement rather than replace human relationships. The problem, when it exists, is not the pet. It's the isolation that sometimes surrounds the behavior, the slow contraction of a social world until the only voices left are the ones that purr. That contraction can be gentle and comforting, or it can be quietly stifling. Awareness gives you the option to open the windows. If you want practical, low-effort ways to keep the warmth without closing the circle, try a few experiments. Invite a friend over for a fur-friendly potluck where everyone brings a snack for humans and a small pet-safe treat. Schedule one weekly phone call with a relative and put the pet nearby so they can become familiar to each other. Practice saying yes and in conversations. Yes to the pet's needs and yes to an evening out once a month. These are small shifts, but they allow you to maintain rituals without becoming hermetic. Now, for those of you who have reached the summit of this list, owning monogrammed collars and filing a testament for a sunspot schedule, here's a small conspiratorial reassurance. You are not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of people who have, at various points, prioritized a furry chest over a human conversation. The internet is a wide, forgiving archive of pet-first stories that range from the touching to the gloriously ridiculous. We make jokes, we craft rituals, we form communities. This is part of what contemporary care looks like: inventive, improvised, and earnest. But if any of this has sparked a pinch of discomfort, maybe at the idea of a guest list curated by mood or a ritualized uninviting, consider the simplest human practice there is: the call. Call someone who used to be in your orbit. Tell them about the latest toy acquisition or the unexpected antics of the cat. Invite them to a walk. Don't make the pet an excuse for absence. Make it an invitation to new forms of togetherness.
Humans are adaptable. Animals help us remember how to slow down. Both can be true. At the end of the day, what all our signs point to is this: devotion can be eccentric. Devotion can be profound. Devotion can make you invent nicknames and file elaborate instruction manuals, and yes, sign official papers that put a paw print metaphorically next to your own name. It can also be a tender architecture for a life that would otherwise be quiet. If you're reading this and thinking guilty as charged, lean into that with good humor. Celebrate the joy, check your calendar, and maybe once in a while let a human take the sunbeam while you heat up a soup to bring to a friend. To leave you with an image, picture your home as a parliament of attention, where different voices, human, canine, feline, and the occasional stubborn parrot, debate the proper allocation of couch real estate. Sometimes the vote will go to the tail, sometimes to a visitor with coffee. The point is to keep voting. Let the tally be social, not solitary. Now, our tiny ritual at the end of lists like this. Which sign was the one that made you choke laugh or hide a blush? Drop the number in the comments with a one-line confession. What's the most pet first thing you've done that would look suspiciously normal in this catalog? Share the story. We want the receipts and the receipts of affection. And if you enjoyed wandering through this small, slightly unnerving atlas of devotion, hit subscribe so we can keep making lists that feel like mirrors and that come with a light dusting of pet hair. See you in the comments, and give your friend, the furry one, an extra treat from us.